For 17 weeks, the Speke strikers have poured through the factory gates at 11 a.m. every Thursday to collect their tax rebates. Yesterday, they did it for the last time. From Monday, they'll be back in, making cars. All week, shop stewards have been cosseted with management to renegotiate the plans, to speed up the track, and to cut manning levels. But for the workers, the victory is a hollow one. The real fight, the fight to save the plant from closure, has only just begun. With the whole of Leyland on its knees, Speke No.2 has become surplus to requirements.
We're determined to fight it, even if it means sitting in there until the place closes down completely or until someone else takes over. We are determined that we'll sit in there in that factory and fight it right down the line.
The car makers never really wanted to come to Merseyside in the first place. The traditional home of standard Triumph had always been in Coventry. But then in 1959, under the strategy to relocate industry, the government twisted their arm and persuaded them to come up here to Speke. For the next 10 years, they doubled the original workforce, turning out body shells for the Triumph Herald, the Vitesse, the 1300, and so on. And then in 1970, they built this, the now infamous Speke No.2 plant, at a cost of £10.5 million. It was one of the most modern and best-equipped plants in Europe, designed to build more than 100,000 vehicles a year, all under one roof. At the time, it was very much an act of faith in the whole future of the motor industry here on Merseyside.
Merseyside makes the Triumph TR7, a low-priced, wedge-shaped two-seater. The car was launched with even more than the usual ballyhoo to take America by storm.
So that was the dream, but the root causes of the problems in there are due to this. For Speke No.2 plant, the decision to turn over almost the entire complex to the manufacture of this one car was the beginning of the end. The TR7 was ill-conceived from the word go. It was aimed, after all, at the North American market. And the Americans can't resist an all-British, open, soft-top sports car in the grand tradition. So they made it a hardtop. Purists say that it's a basically dishonest sort of design, meant to look like an upmarket mid-engine car, but with very basic mechanics under the skin. Most people agree that from the front, it looks good. Not quite so hot from the side, and from the back, well, what do you think? When the Great American Dream went sour, the car was relaunched on the British market in May 1976. And since then, Leyland have been virtually giving the cars away. Financially, it's a flop.
It hasn't sold in anything like the numbers they had hoped.
Leyland admit that they've had many problems with what they call warranty. Well, that simply means new cars leaving the factory not properly screwed together. A common complaint has been the gearbox, and the Motor Magazine's own test car had to have a new one after 2,000 miles. And that was before the fan disintegrated, the wheel bearings went, and the boot block fell out.
All new designs have their teething troubles, and all models have their share of faults. But there seems to be something about the way the Speke plant operates which affects the quality of the car.
The management over the years, I think, have been very soft, and they've let themselves get into a position where the shop stewards virtually run the plant, where they are a pseudo-management.
How do you mean?
Well, I mean in the sense that the managers could hardly move a foot without getting the agreement of the shop stewards through a splendid thing called the mutuality agreement, whose main purpose, it seems to me, was to stop the place being managed at all. And then there's the fact that Speke is at the bottom of the league in so many ways. It's at the bottom of the Leyland League, and that's saying a lot.
In what sort of ways?
Well, for example, if you take productivity, Leyland is not a high productivity company. Speke is at the bottom of the productivity league. It's only half as efficient as, say, Abingdon. Then you take a thing like absenteeism. Again, Speke, top of the league. Double the company average, more than double the company average overall. Mondays and Fridays, anywhere between 15 and 25%. Quality. Again, very low down in the company league. Again, in a company where quality is still, by its own estimates, 10, 15 points behind the most efficient of the Japanese. Overmanning, 25% worse than the next Leyland plant. Now, all that adds up to a highly inefficient plant. in a highly inefficient company, and you can make out a very good case for saying that Speke is one of the most inefficient car companies, not just in Leyland, but in the world.
17 weeks on strike, and now the threat of total closure have made the rift in relations between management and men even wider than it was. Almost every worker has a theory for what went wrong and who's to blame.
This factory, brand new factory, oh, it's all brand new. But where did the managers come from? Cast-offs from Coventry and bloody Longbridge and all them places. That's all that's happening. Well, you tell him. You tell him.
You've got the floor. Talking about bloody productivity and we're getting bloody engines up here that we've got to work on.
Well, come over and
put them in a car. We've got gearboxes that we've got to work on before we can put them in a bloody car. We've got axles that we've got to work on before we can put them in a bloody car. We've even got bloody engine bloody bolts that we've got to send out locally to be plated before we can put them in a bloody car. And they're accusing this plant, of lack of productivity. What can we do? To quote Winston Churchill's bloody words, give us the tools and we do the bloody job.
This car is a disgrace. It never sold, and all the management done say the greatest exporter they've ever had from Leyland. And it didn't. It's a load of bloody rubbish, that car. It is one load of bloody rubbish. And all Edwards can do, you know, he's got as much guts as his height, which is 5 foot, and that's how much guts he got.
There was times where they've had to send down the commentary, which is excuse me, this is where they've had soft things come. There was one time there in the TR7, they had 5,000 left-hand wings for the front ends, and they sent down to Coventry for 5,000 right hands, and what happened? They sent 5,000 left hands up, and now that laid us off for 3 days, that, through stupid management, for that's nothing to do with us, but this has gone on time and time again, but it's gone beyond a joke now.
Hasn't there been very high absenteeism, 25%?
There is, yeah, I agree.
On Mondays and Fridays?
I agree.
There's never been 25%.
No, but there's never been as much to stop the job.
Although the vast majority of firms haven't had a strike for years, Merseyside has acquired a reputation for bolshy workers and bad industrial relations. It comes mainly from troubles in the motor industry and the docks, neither exactly famed for industrial harmony and lack of strikes. People talk about the so-called Merseyside disease, the idea that somehow people here don't work as hard as in other parts of Britain.
I think it dates back this to, like our granddads and grandfathers, of the time when they were on the dock standing in pens. It's just a thing that they hate management. They don't really hate them, but it dates back to that time. You know, when you were picked, if your face fitted or you'd work for less money. I think all this dates back to this sort of time. That even if you work, say, in Tesco's, you still have a little thing about the management.
This is Garston. Depressed areas like this around the car plant have had it bad for years. The last thing that Garston needs is another closure. Unemployment here is already twice the national average. In Greater Merseyside, 70,000 people are out of work. This is the other side of the TR7 story, away from the tracks and the talks on overmanning. The local employment offices brace themselves for the effects of the Leyland closure. The Triumph workers will be hard to place.
Most of them are going to be unskilled or semi-skilled assembly workers. These are always the most difficult people to place in any case. And here on Merseyside, we find that roughly about 70% of our register is already made up of this sort of person. So another 2,500, 3,000 coming onto the books is obviously going to make it even that more difficult for them to find work, as well as the people who are already on the books.
Shop stewards know that the strike must end before the workers could be mobilised to stop the closure. Now plans are laid to try to keep the TR7 here at Speke. There's talk of sit-ins in what they see as a fight for the right to work.
A right to work campaign is all right, but I don't think they can have a right to work when you feel like it campaign, because unfortunately in the big league that does not work. They're not playing in the Merseyside and District Football League. They're playing in a very, very tough world league. I mean, just take the biggest Japanese importer into this country, Datsun. They have had no strike or stoppage of any of their assembly lines, for other than mechanical reasons, for 20 years. And neither, what's more, have any of their component suppliers. Now, that's the league these boys have been playing in, and I'm afraid they've not been playing the kind of game that keeps you in that league. It just brings relegation, and sometimes it kills the club, and I'm afraid that's what's happened.
Leyland are adamant that Speke No.2 must die if the rest of their operation and the other 120,000 jobs up and down the country are to be saved. So there might be a certain irony in the original choice of the location for the plant, next to a cemetery, and for the choice of code name for the whole TR7 project. It's known as the Bullet.